My name is Rachel. I'm 40 years old, and 6 months ago, my sister told me she was dying. 6 months left, she whispered. Please, don't tell anyone. I believed her. I sold my car, gave her my savings, even handed her the keys to my house. I moved into a rundown apartment with peeling paint and a leaking ceiling just so she could spend her last days in peace. I skipped meals to send her money for chemo, for her final trip to Italy, for her dream burial dress. I cried every night thinking I was losing her. And when they told me she died in her sleep, I believed that too, until yesterday. When a friend sent me a photo from Venice, a woman on a yacht in a red dress, raising a glass of champagne. That woman was my sister. She didn't die. She disappeared. And she took everything from me. If you think that's the end, stay here, like, subscribe, and let me show you what she stole, besides my trust. My sister said she only had 6 months to live. That's how she broke the silence after 3 years of no contact. Her voice trembled like the drizzle outside, her skin pale as paper, her eyes brimming with the kind of fear that makes you forget to breathe. I believed her, without hesitation, without a single question. I sold my car, I drained my savings, I handed her the keys to my house and moved into a moldy rental apartment where the mattress barely inflated and the walls were too thin to hold any peace. I spooned cheap soup out of plastic cups, skipped meals to pay for chemo sessions I never saw, and transferred thousands for her final wishes. A trip to Italy, a silk burial dress, one last sunset in Santorini. Please don't tell anyone, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks like confessions. I don't want pity. I just want to go quietly. I nodded. That silence became my vow. Exactly 6 months later, I got the call. She'd passed in her sleep, peacefully. No pain, they said. The funeral was small. The casket stayed closed. A black and white photo sat on the altar, her smile frozen mid-laugh, as if mocking the grief that filled the room. Strangers cried. I collapsed. My chest cracked open like it couldn't hold the loss. But the next morning, a friend sent me a photo from their vacation feed. A woman on a luxury yacht in Venice, raising a glass of champagne. Red dress, blonde waves, alive. No scarf on her head, no IV in sight, no funeral ever happened. My sister didn't die. She vanished. And she took everything I had with her. But I wasn't finished. And neither was she. You might be thinking, that's already the worst kind of betrayal. But trust me, what came next was even more devastating. Would you have seen it coming if you were in my shoes? Stay with me. I sat in the middle of my tiny rental apartment, the screen of my phone still glowing with the image that had shattered whatever was left of my reality. Vanessa, alive. Vanessa, smiling. Vanessa, dressed in a red dress and sipping champagne on a yacht in Venice like she hadn't just conned me, and the world, into mourning her death. She looked radiant, not ravaged, confident, not dying. That photo should have made me scream, but instead, I just sat there, clutching the phone like it was the last thing tethering me to the truth. When I opened my fridge that night, it echoed with emptiness, mocking me with shelves as bare as my bank account. I had spent everything. On her treatments, her hospice bills, her final trip. I'd eaten instant noodles for months while she waltzed through Europe on what used to be my future. I called my aunt. She didn't pick up. My cousin replied with a single text. Maybe take some time off, you're not thinking clearly. The world wasn't ignoring me. They were dismissing me, slotting me into the category of unwell, the grieving sister who couldn't let go. No one believed me. Worse, they thought I was unraveling. The next morning, I went to the bank to ask for an extension on my loan. The woman behind the glass looked at me, the way you look at someone who's already lost. I'm sorry, Ms. Harper. Your savings account was fully withdrawn 3 months ago. We have signatures on file. My retirement, gone, stolen with my own name. When I got home, an email was waiting. Thank you for your generous $50,000 donation to Last Light Foundation. Your contribution will help terminal patients live their final days in dignity. I had never heard of that foundation. But the number was exact. I dug through old receipts, cross-referenced names, addresses, transfers, and every trail pointed back to me. Every bill, every payment, every lie wore my signature. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, watching her face on that screen. The woman I'd held as a baby. The woman I'd once sworn to protect. She had faked her death and used my grief as her stage. She hadn't just stolen my money, she'd buried me with it. But I wasn't staying buried. Not for long. Not when the truth was clawing its way back to the surface. And this time, I wasn't the one being mourned. Have you ever stared at a photo and felt your world collapse? That was the moment everything broke. But also, when something inside me woke up. Are you ready to find out what I did next? I cleared off the tiny wall above my kitchen table and started pinning things. Printouts, receipts, screenshots, dates, until it looked less like a home and more like a war room. Every inch held a lie that once passed for love. A fake prescription signed by a doctor who didn't exist. A pathology report with the same typo used in an old scam from Florida. A letterhead from the Midwest Oncology Institute, except no such place had ever been registered. I stood back and stared at it all. The puzzle wasn't complicated. It was obvious. Painfully, insultingly obvious. And yet, I had believed every single piece of it because it came from Vanessa. But the internet didn't lie like she did. That's where I found the blog post. Dated 2014, Chicago. Title: Serial Cancer Scam Artist Dupes Over 30 Victims in Emotional Swindle. The photo was grainy, zoomed in on a courtroom exit. She had darker hair and no makeup, but I knew that face. That was her. Even back then, she was already rehearsing eulogies. I stayed awake, replaying a voice I hadn't heard in years. Claire Monroe. She was still in law school when I helped cover one of her tuition deadlines. She called me her angel donor. I never asked for a repayment, but her message had stayed buried in my inbox like a forgotten promise. If you ever need anything at all, I owe you my life. I found the number. I dialed. No pleasantries, no preamble, just one sentence. It's time to pay me back, Claire. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Where do we start?" And right then, something in me clicked. It wasn't revenge that moved my hands across the keyboard or guided my eyes through court databases and archived obituaries. It was clarity. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. And I damn sure wasn't dead. I was assembling the truth piece by sharpened piece until the lies had nowhere left to hide. I wasn't broken. I was just sharpening my blade. Okay, so now I had the truth. But how do you bring down someone who's made a career out of hiding? What would you do if you had one shot and no backup? Don't blink. It's about to get intense. Claire didn't gasp. She didn't stutter. She didn't even pause. When I told her everything, from the forged cancer reports to the funeral invitations that doubled as alibis, she simply said, "Come by tomorrow and bring everything." Her office was colder than I remembered, tucked behind a nonprofit's nondescript door. But her voice, still sharp as broken glass. She ran her fingers across the trail of lies I laid out, wire transfers, donation slips, medical invoices with doctored headers, every dollar I lost, every name she used, every shell account. Claire didn't blink. She built a map, and at the center of it, Vanessa Harper, or Nessa Reed, or Tina Bell, depending on the lie. She traced the money like it was a bloodline. Every fraudulent charity, every anonymous tip jar, every GoFundMe with an expiration date and a photo of my sister looking pale in a hospital gown. They all pointed back to the same cluster of accounts, all linked to one masternode. The names were fake, the banks were real. And when she turned her laptop to face me, showing a transaction marked "Transfer to Self-Alias Account," I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just nodded. We filed the report quietly. I signed the affidavit like a woman sealing a casket. No screaming, no social media blast, No confrontation at the cafe where she posed for sympathy photos. Just a folder in Claire's hands and a direct delivery to the financial crimes unit. Let her find out the way I found out, by surprise, in silence. Let her feel the quiet dread of a doorbell that won't stop ringing. The first move, I requested a copy of her death certificate, just to confirm what I already knew. Forged. Sloppy. The witness who signed off didn't exist. The registrar's office flagged it before I even asked. It wasn't just illegal, it was stupid. Vanessa had planned a perfect performance, but forgot that the curtain call leaves a paper trail. Claire looked at me, eyebrow raised. You want to sue for restitution? I shook my head. No, I want to go biblical. You thought this was just a family feud? Oh no. This became something much bigger. You won't believe where I found myself standing just weeks later, in front of a crowd and a camera. It was a beautiful venue. Absurdly beautiful, actually. White roses curled up stair rails. A baby grand piano waited in the corner. And the photo of my late sister beamed down from a golden frame like she'd been canonized. The invitation called it a celebration of life. It felt more like a charity gala. There were canapes, champagne flutes, a velvet step and repeat with her name on it. Some guests wore black, but most opted for designer pastels, like grief was just another Instagram aesthetic. I walked in alone, dressed in a simple black dress that hadn't seen daylight since our mother's real funeral. No makeup, no speech prepared, just a USB drive in my pocket and a small projector in my tote bag. I waited until the fourth eulogy. That's when I stood, calm, steady. I'd like to say a few words about my sister, I said into the microphone. People turned, recognizing my face. Some nodded with compassion, some whispered. I stepped toward the screen, plugged in the drive, and clicked play. The first image appeared. Vanessa, holding a cocktail under the Ibiza sun. Not a week old, not a trace of sickness. Just glowing skin and oversized sunglasses. A murmur swept the room. Then came the next slides. Scanned documents, doctored medical reports, wire transfers to accounts under names like Tina Bell and Nessa Reed. The sound of confusion turned to horror. Screenshots of old mugshots followed. News clippings, victim testimonies, bank records. Then someone shouted, "That's my money! I gave her 20 grand!" Another guest gasped, staggered backward, and collapsed into a chair with tears streaking her cheeks. A man in a tailored suit rose slowly, red-faced, shaking with rage. The event coordinator stood frozen, her mouth open, eyes darting around for guidance. But there was none, only truth, brutal, undeniable, glowing from the projector like Judgment Day. And then I saw her, hiding in the back, behind the floral archway, half covered by shadows and a silk scarf. Her eyes locked on the screen, first wide with disbelief, then shrinking. Panic began to crawl across her face like frost. She took one step back, then another. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And then, silence. She went silent, completely, irrevocably, horrifyingly silent. I could have stopped there. I had already shaken her world. But some truths deserve to be seen, not whispered. Want to see how I turned a eulogy into a reckoning? The final slide held for a beat longer than the others. A grainy, shaky video, shot from across the street, played in silence. My sister, radiant and fully alive, exited a luxury spa with a smoothie in one hand and a phone in the other, laughing at something on the screen. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Yesterday. The room froze. The image stayed projected behind me, burning through every lie that had dressed this event in black velvet and tear-streaked speeches. No one moved. No one breathed. I turned to the audience, then to the live stream camera pointed at me. My voice didn't shake. If you gave her money, if you signed a check, or wired a donation to any of her medical funds, I urge you to contact me. I have all the proof we need to launch a class action lawsuit. Murmurs grew louder, some gasps, others a simmering fury. I didn't need to look for her. I felt her shrinking. Somewhere in the crowd, beneath the silk scarf and manufactured grief, Vanessa was finally, fully exposed. The police stepped forward, not rushing, not shouting, just presence. That was enough. There were no cuffs, just something worse, the collective weight of every person she ever fooled turning away from her, one by one. She didn't scream, she didn't run. She just stood there as the crowd parted like water around a corpse finally floating to the surface. I gathered my projector, slipped the USB back into my pocket, and looked one last time at the crowd, then directly into the camera. She tried to fake her death, I said, letting each word cut through the silence. All I did was bring her back to life in front of everyone. And then I walked out, no applause, no victory music, just the sound of the truth finally landing, heavy and undeniable. Was that the end? Not even close. You've seen the explosion, now let me show you the quiet, powerful aftermath. Because sometimes healing is louder than revenge. The old house hadn't changed much from the outside, but stepping through the front door, after everything felt like entering a new life, one I had to fight for, one that cost me more than I ever thought I'd lose. The walls still held the scent of cedar and distant laughter. The kitchen tiles still bore the same crack near the fridge. But something inside had shifted. Less haunted now, more mine. I started with the bougainvillea, the one Vanessa once called dusty, old-fashioned, too much like Grandma's funeral flowers. I didn't care. I dug into the soil with my bare hands, pressing each root down like I was planting a promise. One that said, "You didn't break me." The first bloom came within a week, bright magenta against the pale fence, like a bold, defiant laugh after years of silence. Claire stopped by the second week. She didn't bring papers this time, just a bottle of lemon verbena tea and a smile softer than I'd ever seen on her. We didn't talk about the lawsuit or the headlines. We just sat on the porch steps as the sun dipped low behind the trees, sipping warmth and watching the wind dance through the newly planted vines. That's how healing began, not with justice slamming down like a gavel, but with quiet presence, a friend who stayed after the storm passed. One afternoon, a letter arrived with a Georgia postmark. Inside were 3 separate cards, handwritten. "Thank you for what you did," one said. "I thought I'd never get even a cent of it back," said another. The third, from a woman named Gina, simply read, "You gave me my voice back." They had joined the class action suit Claire helped organize. And to my disbelief, they'd recovered a portion of what they'd lost. Not much, but enough. Enough to feel like someone was finally listening. That same evening, I opened my laptop and wrote the first page of a project that had been resting quietly at the back of my mind. I called it Truth Beneath the Veil. A small foundation, not grand or political, but deeply human. A place for people like me, who had been robbed not just of money, but of trust, by the very people they called family. I wasn't a lawyer or a counselor, but I could be a bridge, a listener, a hand reaching back through the dark. The next Sunday, I made roasted tomato soup and toasted sourdough with rosemary butter. I lit the good candles, not because it was a special occasion, but because it was Sunday, because I was home. I knocked on 2 doors, Mrs. Fisher's, who lived alone since her husband passed, and the Donnellys, who'd just moved in with twin toddlers and looked like they hadn't had a hot meal in days. They came over in slippers and cardigans, smiles wary at first, then warmer with each spoonful. That night, laughter filled the kitchen again, hesitant, then louder, like a forgotten melody finding its notes. Sometimes I hear children's bikes on the driveway. Sometimes I hear silence, and both feel holy now. There are still moments when I pass the mirror and expect to see grief written across my face, when I find the old photo albums and my hands hesitate on the pages. Vanessa's smile is there, forever frozen in birthdays and beach trips, her arms around me like a lie I once called love. But I don't tear them out. I let them stay, not as wounds, but as warnings. I survived her. That's the truth those pictures can't erase. And on clear mornings, I walk barefoot into the backyard, coffee in one hand, a book in the other, and sit beneath the archway I built myself. The bougainvillea drapes above me now, lush, wild, unapologetically alive. I breathe in the sweetness, close my eyes, and feel the world turn, quiet, honest, whole. For the first time in years, I don't look over my shoulder. And when people ask how I healed, I don't tell them it was the lawsuit or the headlines or even the day I exposed her. I tell them it was the soup, the garden, the Sunday evenings, the moment I chose to stay soft in a world that tried to make me bitter. She faked her death to disappear. I planted flowers and dared the world to see me grow. You might be wondering, what happened to her after all that? Let's just say, karma doesn't need to shout. Her silence said everything. Vanessa didn't go out with a bang. No screams, no chase, no headlines about a glamorous arrest. She simply vanished into the system like a stain absorbed by rough cloth. Quietly, thoroughly, and without ceremony. 1 week after the fake funeral collapsed into chaos, she was taken into custody at a spa in Miami, her hair still damp, her nails freshly painted, her lies finally outpaced by the truth. She didn't fight the arrest, she didn't cry, just lowered her sunglasses, gave one of her signature smirks. And for the first time, it didn't work. There was no one to call, no mother waiting with bail money, no friends who hadn't already turned their backs. And certainly not me. Her name, Vanessa Harper, was stripped from every document that followed. Court records referred to her by inmate ID. The news didn't bother with aliases anymore. They called her what she had always been, but never admitted out loud, a serial fraudster with a trail of emotional and financial wreckage stretching across 4 states. Investigators unearthed layers of her deception like sediment from a poisoned well. Every city, every scam, every smiling photograph taken under a different name. The journalists were relentless, so were the victims. She was transferred between holding facilities, waiting on charges in 3 jurisdictions. The weight of her performance finally bore down on her. The silky scarves were gone, the designer shoes replaced with state-issued slippers. One paper printed a photo of her from the intake at Rikers. Head shaved, jaw clenched, face pale under fluorescent light. Her eyes, always sharp and calculating, now hollowed out like something inside had given up. No one visited. No one sent letters. No one posted bond. Even the Facebook page she'd once curated like a digital shrine to her fake suffering, photos of IV bags, hospital gowns, tearful selfies, went silent. The comments stopped. The sympathy turned to fury. I heard one of her old roommates try to delete their shared photo albums. I imagine the likes turned cold first, then the messages, then the memories. I didn't check in on her, but the news did that for me. Headlines trickled down every couple of months with clinical updates. Arraignment postponed, new charges filed, out-of-state extradition scheduled. Her story became background noise, another cautionary tale swallowed up by the churn of scandal. But to me, it was personal. Not because I needed to see her suffer, but because I needed to know the world had finally caught up to the damage she caused. One article described her as visibly unwell. Another said she refused all interviews. A few painted her as a master manipulator, unraveling in solitary silence. I read them all with a strange detachment, like watching a stranger fall from a building you once lived in. The last photo I saw of her was printed on the back page of a Sunday paper. Grainy, poorly lit, taken through a cracked courthouse window. She looked small, smaller than I remembered, her cheekbones more pronounced, eyes bruised with sleeplessness. No makeup, no performance, just her, raw, exposed, and, for the first time, undeniably real. And for a flicker of a second, I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel vengeance burning behind my ribs. I felt nothing. Not cold, not warm, just nothing. It was the kind of emptiness that only comes after a fire has burned everything down. There's no more smoke, no more sound, just scorched earth and the quiet miracle of space. Some say silence is the absence of justice. I say it's sometimes the most honest form of it. She used to own every room she walked into, eyes always watching her, attention bending around her voice. But now, her name is barely whispered. If people mention her, it's in hushed tones of embarrassment or disbelief. The legacy she built on sympathy and seduction has rotted into a cautionary footnote in courthouse gossip. Her world has shrunk to cinderblock walls and a stainless steel sink bolted to a concrete floor. Her meals are served through a slot, her conversations are monitored. Her mirror, if she has one, doesn't reflect the woman she worked so hard to pretend to be. And that's the most poetic justice I could ask for. Because in the end, I didn't need to destroy her. I didn't need to scream or fight or ruin her life. She did it all on her own. All I did was show the world who she truly was. By now, you've seen the justice. But want to know what truly lasts? Legacy. Let me show you what I built. Not out of anger, but from the ashes of a lie. I never imagined myself standing at a podium again. Not after everything. Not after the courtroom echoes, the betrayals, the headlines that twisted our last name into something synonymous with deceit. But there I was, in a modest community center room that smelled faintly of old paper and fresh paint, surrounded by folding chairs and stories heavier than mine. No cameras, no sponsorships, just people. Quiet, hopeful, broken in familiar ways. The first time I shared my story publicly, I expected resistance, shame, maybe even anger, but what I received was silence. And then a single hand reaching for mine. An elderly woman with trembling fingers, her eyes glassy with unshed tears, clutched my hand like it was the only solid thing left in her world. "You helped me wake up, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice cracking like an old record. "You helped me see it wasn't love. It was manipulation." I squeezed her hand, not to comfort her, but to remind her she hadn't been alone in that fog. I didn't write a book. I didn't go on talk shows or sell my pain in glossy interviews. I didn't want fame. I wanted change. So every Tuesday, I printed 24 flyers, simple sheets warning people about emotional fraud, especially the kind that wears a familiar face. I handed them out in hospital lobbies, nursing homes, and the local food pantry. Some people read them, some threw them away, but I kept showing up because someone once told me that justice isn't loud, it's lasting. And now I understood what that meant. Back home, my life was quiet in the best possible way. The garden bloomed again, bougainvillea spilling over the fence with a stubborn, brilliant pink. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary most nights, and my old floorboards creaked like they were finally settling too. I'd taped a quote to the corner of my desk. It wasn't grand or poetic, just a whisper to myself on days when doubt crept back in. Justice isn't loud, it's lasting. And beneath it, a photo of my mother. Not Vanessa, not any courtroom image, just my mother. Because even though she wasn't here to see the ending, I wanted to believe she would have been proud of the way I wrote it. The fund I started, Truth Beneath the Veil, had a slow beginning, but it grew, like all good things do, patiently, quietly, with heart. We helped people draft affidavits, connected them with honest lawyers, and sometimes just sat with them in silence while they processed what had been done to them by those who claimed to love them. It was never about erasing what happened. It was about making sure it didn't happen again. I reconnected with Marcus too. He came by on Sundays sometimes, bringing fresh peaches from the farmer's market. We didn't talk much about Vanessa anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined the air between us. One evening, he said, "I used to think justice was vengeance." I nodded and replied, "I used to think forgiveness meant inheritance." He laughed softly. We both knew now that neither were true. Justice is clarity, forgiveness is freedom. And legacy is what you leave behind when your name no longer needs defending. Each Saturday evening, I brewed a pot of ginger tea, the way my mother used to, and sat by the window that overlooked the street. There was nothing extraordinary about it. No triumphant music played, Just the wind pushing leaves across the pavement, the scent of something baking 2 houses down, and the gentle clink of my teaspoon against porcelain. That, to me, was power. The kind that didn't need applause. The kind that no one could steal. Vanessa thought she had written the ending. That the lies would be buried beneath roses and velvet. That the truth, once silenced, would stay that way. But stories don't belong to liars. They belong to survivors. And I was still here. Still writing. Still living. The final chapter wasn't written in revenge. It was written in resilience. In every hand I held, in every flyer I gave out, in every cup of tea poured beneath the sunset, she thought she wrote her ending, but I rewrote the final chapter. And this time, it didn't need her name in it at all. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story touched something in you, or reminded you of someone, leave a comment below. And if you believe in stories that reveal truth and strength, like and subscribe. More voices, more justice. We're just getting started.